We'll skip all that intro music crap. Anyway, guys, welcome to Wombat Talks episode 9. We got a lot of fun stuff to go over today. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube, though. This is important. Otherwise, I'll literally die. Before we get started, I am going to link the stream to everybody on my Twitter, though, so they can all come in and hang out and watch me talk about the news. So, let's get into it now. Got a decent number of news pieces today. And that's always good, and I'm going to be finishing it up with a big Metal Gear Solid 5 review. I will pop through shortly after I'm done with this, check my timestamps on everything, and, just generally go through, give myself, and so I can grab and put the times in the description like I used to do. Should be fairly easy now. So, let's start it off. A big one. Julien Merceron, the lead developer on the Fox engine for Konami, has quit. And word on the inside is that Konami has basically stopped development on all AAA titles other than PES, their soccer franchise, and Metal Gear Online, which should be more or less done. I imagine they're pretty much just finishing that up now. And this follows on a trend we've seen over the past several months, where essentially Konami has been backing themselves off from engagement in AAA gaming entirely. The cancellation of PT, Silent Hills, just basically everything that they had on board. A lot of great names on board as well, with a lot of great franchises. They've decided to throw those in the toilet as they no longer need any of that crap. They're going to develop cell phone games, you guys. That's where the money is these days, according to Konami's absolutely ridiculous current president. And I got to say, it's been coming. We've been talking about this for a couple months. One of the Wombat Talks from a while ago, back when they were still called Willy Talks, was basically about this exact same thing. And, it doesn't really come as a terrible surprise, I'd say, to most people who've been following along with the Konami news. But it's more or less getting into the realm of incontrovertible now. The information's starting to leak out. Konami basically no longer a games company, unless you count PES. And, you're probably, if you're a European listener, divided into either the PES or the FIFA camp. But going forward, I can't imagine that you think that you've got a lot of confidence that PES is going to continue to be a quality product. They're going to keep teams around because that's a moneymaker, but by and large, they've entirely abandoned AAA game development. So Konami, as far as I'm concerned, no longer a video game company. Don't know what they're going to do other than slowly fade into worthless obscurity, because honestly, I don't think they're going to make as much money as they think they're going to make on mobile games unless they're bringing something really genuinely new and interesting. And especially after the rave reviews that Metal Gear Solid 5 has gotten, it's interesting to see them continue down this course. But I guess once the bridges are burning, you don't stand around on it and see if things get better. You just go ahead and go to the other side of the river, where you look back across at people like Kojima and Guillermo del Toro and tons of other massive names with massive fan appeal and massive sales potential, and you think to yourself, this is fine. And that's what Konami's doing, so fuck them. But yeah, rest in peace, Konami, I guess. What are you going to do? Sad to see people losing jobs, though, I think is the big thing for me. It's just really depressing that, the perfectly reasonable franchises that they could capitalize on, and people are going out of work and going to have to go work somewhere else now, I guess. But still, I'll talk a little bit about Fox Engine and that whole thing a little bit later in my Metal Gear Solid 5 review at the end of the podcast, which I will preface with giant spoiler warnings so you know to stop listening. Anyway, moving on. Overwatch trailer, The Junkers. Basically, skinny guy and a fat guy who like explosions. They're, I guess, Australian criminals. It seemed to be suggesting by the pretend news report that was in the trailer. I generally uninterested in the pair as far as gameplay goes. Maybe they'll be interesting. Not sure. I mean, I'm assuming they're going to be two characters. A first-person shooter game. I don't really know how they would work that in. So I'm assuming that was a double character reveal. They're just partners in sort of the way you think about the heavy and the medic in TF2. I don't know that it's quite the same symbiotic relationship. We'll see how all their stuff ends up working together. But that brings me to my sub point, and the main reason I'm going to talk about the Overwatch trailer this week. I'm kind of starting to get annoyed with how long people seem to think it's okay to drag out the hype train. I mean, I feel like, okay, you're giving me, and another one that I'm going to talk about a little bit later is an offender here, Persona 5. You keep putting out trailers. In the case of Persona 5, I think there are 3, maybe they put out a 4th trailer just recently, or 3 trailers, I think, so far. So, but yeah, with Overwatch, dozens of trailers, tons of hype. A couple people got to play it at Gamescom. But I don't know why I'm supposed to care. I can't play it. I don't give a shit. What's the point? I mean, I get that you're hyping the game and that Blizzard fanboys are probably really on board with this whole thing, but I have nothing. There's nothing. What am I supposed to care about? Like a gameplay trailer from a year ago, almost entirely a year ago. If it doesn't come out in 2015, I honestly want to stop hearing about it until we're a couple weeks away from, at the very least, an open beta. Otherwise, I'm starting to lose interest, honestly, in Overwatch, and kitschy little trailers with honestly pretty nice art in them are not gonna keep me interested. Honestly, the Junkers didn't do a whole lot for me as far as character interest. They're kind of boring looking, kind of unremarkable in general. But you know, my big problem is that Overwatch, Blizzard seems to be trying to drag this out like we care. They were fairly expedient in moving from hype for the recent Hearthstone expansion to just getting it out. They've been pretty reasonable about not hinting at characters and things in development for Heroes of the Storm when they're too far away. But you know, I mean, I don't know if that's going to continue to be the case here. Heroes of the Storm just recently put out an in-development trailer that showed 5 different mounts and some skins, and I guess we're supposed to be super excited about that. I guess they showed Artanis, who's coming out. I want to say he's coming out at the same time as Legacy of the Void, but I'm not entirely sure. So whatever, we'll see. And then there's Sergeant Morales, who is the combat medic, who I guess they didn't feel comfortable using the canonical one. But then I guess Sergeant Hammer's not exactly a canonical StarCraft 2 character either, so what are you going to do? But again, the medic was an established medic, but I guess blonde hair, blue eyes was a little bit too on the nose, and they wanted to, you know, reach out there, grab that diversity vote, and see if they could pick up a couple of extra players or something. I don't know. Either way, she looks fine as far as the in-development trailer goes, but we're talking about Overwatch. Well, we're complaining about Overwatch. Overwatch not being out and having no release date or no open beta date and no communication whatsoever. So Blizzard continues to advertise games while not communicating with the fans. Not really news, I guess, so much as it is just kind of annoying. Moving on. There was a new Rise of the Tomb Raider trailer, more of the same as far as Rise of the Tomb Raider goes. If you haven't been following along, it takes place in a forest, sort of alpine setting. Looks like more of the same, honestly. I don't have a ton to say about it. It just looks good. Looks like it's going to be good. That's out November 10th, I think. So I have a couple days to beat that before Fallout 4 comes in, and I'm going to try my darndest to do it. So that I can get some videos out nice and quick before Fallout 4 takes over the entire world and my world as well. So I'll just be in the giant fray of assholes cranking out Fallout 4 videos as quickly as they possibly can, and that's gonna be fun. Because you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna put armor on my dog, and then as soon as I get the opportunity to trade the dog for something else, I'm gonna do that. Maybe a human with some boobs. Seems good to me. Oh, and that's one. I don't think I actually ended up putting it in here. Fallout 4 confirmed that there are going to be a couple of there's going to be more companions than just dog meat. You're going to have Mr. Handy and possibly some others, but they didn't go into it too much. But I would assume there would be humans considering Skyrim. So we'll see. And literally everything else New Vegas. So, not really surprising there, but just something to throw in. Rocket League has announced their first DLC pack called Revenge the Battle Cars. If you don't know, Psyonix created a game. It was called Rocket-Powered Battle Cars, I think. I feel like there's another word that's supposed to be in there somewhere. But Rocket-Powered Battle Cars is it, and Revenge of the Battle Cars is their first DLC. It's going to cost you $4, so not too expensive. Here's what you get. 2 new classic cars from the Battle Cars game, 12 new decals, 6 for each car, 3 new paint types. The paint types are all Toon-based, so there's like a Toon Matte and a Toon Shiny and things like that. There's 3 of those. I can't remember exactly what they are. Toon Metallic, Toon Matte, and one other one. So that'll be interesting. I mean, I'm assuming there's going to be sort of a cell-shaded kind of a look on your paint. 2 new wheels, 1 for each new type of classic car, or rather they're of the style of those classic cars. 2 new rocket boosts. There was one that was sort of a music staff, and I forget what the other one was. 4 new toppers, 2 new antennas. So honestly, if you're way into Rocket League, I look at that less as sort of a must-grab piece of DLC for $4 and more just kind of a way to give the Rocket League guys some more money to keep on doing what they're doing, because honestly, it's a great little game. It's a lot of fun. I think I got it for $15, and I've definitely gotten $14 or $15 worth of fun out of it, so $4, not a bad way to continue supporting the company. I imagine there are going to be a lot of people that are on top of that. It really does, sort of viscerally capture the fun of playing soccer with a car. It's just a good fun. It's easy to pick up. It's easy to put down. The games aren't very long. It's a great little game. Hopefully their DLC does fairly well. Let's move it along here. PlayStation VR pricing has been hinted at. Some Sony person somewhere in some interview mentioned that it will cost as much as a new console, so somewhere in the $400 to $500 range. Considering that Oculus has been fairly shifty on their price point for the Rift once it comes out, the consumer Rift, I should say, we could be looking at price comparable there. If it's on the low end, towards $400. If it's on the up end, towards $500, we could be looking at as much as it was suggested, about $150 gulf between the PlayStation VR and the Oculus Rift. Of course, the Oculus Rift will not work with your PlayStation 4, whereas PSVR is built specifically to do that. Your PlayStation VR will not work on a PC, which I think is a bit short-sighted, honestly, on Sony's part. I think we've talked about that before. So I won't belabor the point now, but it's still one of those things that I find just generally kind of depressing. Hopefully they get it in on the low side as far as cost goes. $400, I think, is not a bad price point for the tech that they're putting into it. And you couple that with the Move controllers being generally decent and Move on the handheld controller, I think you've got a pretty reasonable little piece of equipment. Of course, the concern then turns to games, and no worries, Sony, in possibly the same interview, has said that there are tons of games in development for PlayStation VR worldwide, and that practically every Japanese studio was working on PlayStation VR games. And why not? I think Japan has been genuinely really excited about the prospect of virtual reality. It probably hasn't been covered quite so much in America, but there have been tons of developer meetups on the Oculus Rift prototypes. The Vive, it's where it's always worth bringing that up when you're talking about PlayStation VR and Oculus Rift. The Vive, due out later this year, going to be the first consumer device to market, unless you count the Gear VR consumer version, which I think might clock in just a little bit ahead of it. The Vive is going to have support from some fairly nice games right when it hits launch as well. Elite Dangerous is going to be out there with support, and Valve is doing a lot to help push support behind the scenes. Obviously HTC, the hardware partner on that one. No price point on the Vive yet, but still PlayStation VR, it sounds like Sony's really pushing things in the right direction as far as making sure that there's enough developer support. Hopefully that this doesn't end up creating problems as far as differences in compatibility standards, right? PlayStation VR is going to work off of Move tech largely for position tracking, whereas there's the Constellation tracker for the Oculus Rift and the Lighthouse tracking on the HTC Vive. Obviously, all of those are fairly different tracking methods. However, one of the things that makes me not too concerned, at least in the long run, is that engines like Unity and Unreal Engine 4 are widely being used in CryEngine for their part in things. Not too many people using the Crytek software, but hey, that's okay. CryEngine's still, it's strong. Star Citizen using it. Those operate as very just sort of pluggable middleware services. So if you're developing in something like Unreal Engine 4, even if you've done a decent amount of alteration to the engine, you should still be able to take, say, an Oculus Rift SDK plugin that allows you to basically drop in support for it, fine-tune that a little bit, do the same for the Vive. You can keep a fairly small team pointed at making sure that your VR works across platforms, including PlayStation 4, of course, because all of those engines are going to build out to the PS4, especially with the new very PC-esque architecture in them. You know, it's good stuff. So hopefully PlayStation VR will take off pretty good. And like I said, they seem to have their head in the right place. They know it's going to be about the software and not just the hardware, and that's an important new look, I'd say, out of Sony. They're starting to understand what the market is supposed to look like. They're getting pretty customer focused lately, and I can't say that that's a bad thing. I still don't own anything other than a Wii U, which I bought for Bayonetta 2, which I still haven't finished playing. At some point, I'll have to get a video capture card so I can make fun of Bayonetta 2 while I play it. But that's for a later date. Anyway. That's it for PlayStation VR news and my PlayStation VR ramblings. Let's move it along. Star Fox Zero has been delayed until 2016. Not really super surprising. I mean, honestly, I don't think Nintendo delays a ton of stuff, but they had it slated for a 2015 release. I don't think anybody's going to be too upset about it, as the feelings on Star Fox Zero, as I remember it around E3, were fairly mixed. Just in general, but obviously with the upheaval at Nintendo, I don't think anybody, even if they would have been mad, even if they're massive Star Fox fans, are going to be too upset about it. Miyamoto has issued a response on Nintendo's Facebook page saying that the delay is to facilitate the refinement of the gameplay. So they're trying to tune things down, and honestly, when you've got a transforming, what are they called? R-Wing? Something? I don't remember exactly what they're called, that ship in Star Fox. But they've got a lot of transforming. So there are a lot of different modes of gameplay that they've got to deal with. So it makes sense that refining that down is something that Nintendo's really going to want to work on. And honestly, when you've got Miyamoto saying it, when you're talking about a franchise like Star Fox, you can't really argue with it. You don't want them to rush it out and give you a mediocre game, you know. But it happens. So in this case, hopefully, again, it triggers one of those sort of shifts in making sure that things come out that are good and compelling, because I know I'm not the only one who's starting to think that the Zelda series is starting to get a little bit stale. Mario's been in the doldrums for a very, very long time. I mean, there's this appreciation for Mario Galaxy that came along after the fact. The same for Mario Sunshine. I think they're things that at the time we all felt like we were a little bit too cool for, and that they were a little bit ridiculous. And it's the same with Wind Waker, I suppose, as well. And we finally kind of came around to the idea that, you know what, maybe these are fun, maybe these were a good idea as well, and we were just a little bit too cool for our own good, and we ended up kind of brushing them off. Star Fox Zero remains to be seen if that's going to be that kind of game. It kind of looks, I don't know, kind of ambitious, but also kind of just self-indulgent as well. But, you know, you can't exactly just make Star Fox 64 again, pass it off to the people. So what are you going to do? The Witness is due in January. If you're not sure what The Witness is, Jonathan Blow, the creator of Braid, which you may or may not have played, has built himself a fancy little walk-in simulator. You're going to be able to walk around an island, try and solve some sort of mystery about how mysterious the mysterious nature of this mysterious island is. And, you know, that's pretty much the bulk of the information that's out about that, at least that I've read. I haven't really bothered to look into it too much. It's definitely a very, very beautiful game, very stylized island. You're on it. You're trying to solve a mystery. You know, a lot of people, I think, have a negative view of walking simulators. For me, it just depends on how well the story is brought across. You've got things like everybody everybody's gone to the Rapture, which are just basically being universally reviled. You've got a certain segment of the games press who are saying, they just tried something new and you're yelling at them. Yeah, well, you can try something new and fail. And in this case, honestly, they weren't trying anything new. They kind of went the Vanishing of Ethan Carter route with it and were somehow less engaging even than that. So we'll see if The Witness is able to keep people in for my money. However, I got to say I'm less interested in The Witness going forward, and I'm more interested in Firewatch, which I think is due out later this year. And I got to say I'm really excited for Firewatch. It seems like just a really compelling experience. You basically, play a Wildlands sort of fire lookout ranger. And you walk around and you got a walkie-talkie and you talk to a nice-sounding lady on the other end of the walkie-talkie. I mean, it sounds like a really interesting little game, and that's exactly the sort of thing that I think you'd look for in one of those games that strives to be more of an interactive experience sort of game rather than necessarily an action type of game. So really looking forward to that one. Hopefully some minor puzzling. We'll see what The Witness is as things go on, but it looks pretty good. It's very pretty, so we'll see. But you never quite know. Some bad news if you're a Persona fan. I know I complained about it a little bit at the beginning of the podcast, but Persona 5 has been pushed back to summer 2016. There have been 3 trailers so far for Persona 5, and I've seen a couple of screenshots of in-game action. But one of the things that's got me just a little bit concerned is we're still seeing legacy console development here. Persona 5 is in development currently for the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 3, and that's one of those things that always kind of gives me pause. Am I going to get a worse-looking game because it's being developed for both consoles? Have you streamlined your process in such a way that it's going to be very, very easy for you to kick the models that are higher polygon and the textures that are higher resolution back down? Does that mean that you're not using shaders and visual effects as effectively? Because those are really the things that are going to tax the processing units of those systems. And it says to me also that internally it's fairly likely that Atlas and their development teams have not upgraded their tool set in such a way that they're necessarily working forward, because obviously anything that can build out for PS3 that can also build out for PS4 is going to make some conceits somewhere, unless they're using a more widely developed middleware product. In this case, I think what we might end up running into, and hopefully it doesn't affect the game at all, is that Persona 5 is likely not going to look stunning, but that it will look basically acceptable. They've got their pipeline set up so that they can just drop higher resolution models in, burn that stuff out. But again, it's the effects that are going to take the hit, and I'm always concerned about it. Either way, it's coming summer 2016. It's been delayed, so we'll see what summer 2016 ends up being. If that ends up being sort of June, or if it's the beginning of September, that's obviously a fairly large difference. Hopefully, since it's a pushback, we'll assume an early summer release date, and then we'll find out what's what with Persona 5. I'll probably start doing some playthroughs of the Persona games for this channel, so that'll be fun. Because I still have yet to finish Persona 3, even though I've started it no less than 900 times now. That's a fact. Okay, let's move it along here. Dark Souls 3 going to be released in April. Nothing dramatic there, just Dark Souls 3 is coming out in April. Sometimes that's all the news. The news is just a line. Dark Souls 3 in April. If you're into that sort of thing, check it out. Another short one. Karin will be returning to Street Fighter V. They did some test fight footage of her on Twitch last week, and honestly, she looks pretty good. A lot of people complaining that she looks like she plays a lot like a female Ken, though, honestly, and that's a concern. Have they managed to keep the unique feel of Karin intact, or have they basically just kind of gotten bland with the way characters play in general? I can't imagine the Street Fighter team is low on the ability to come up with new feeling characters, but hey, all you got to do is bring her over in a thoughtful kind of way. She looked fun to play to me, honestly. A little bit more rushdown, I'd say, than Ken, honestly. She didn't have a lot of range to her, but I guess Ken doesn't necessarily either in the newer Street Fighter series. But hey, Street Fighter V, who knows? Who knows how it's going to be? was a new trailer for the Attack on Titan game released last week. Focuses on the 3D maneuver gear. And I'd say it looks interesting. Certainly, they haven't relied over much on cell-style shading for the entire thing. And I think that's probably for the best, given the overall aesthetic of Attack on Titan. And, yeah. Sadly, one of the things that does have me concerned is it's due out on PS4, PS3, and Vita. That's going to be in 2016. Not a ton of gameplay in the trailer. The 3D maneuver gear looked pretty easy to use and pretty fun, honestly. But again, it's that legacy console development that makes me concerned that we're not necessarily, if we're picking it up on the PS4, going to be getting the most intriguing experience. We're not going to necessarily get the best game that we could possibly get. Again, it's Attack on Titan. It's an anime/manga-based video game, so possibly not quite that much to worry about. But hey, I'm always worried about it. Again, if you see games, and you're going to see a lot of this out of the Japanese market, you're going to see a lot of games that are coming out on PS4 and PS3. I'd say be wary of them. Honestly, a lot of those games aren't necessarily putting their best foot forward. I know that was the case when the PS2 switched over to the PS3. A lot of those legacy companies wanted to still get as much of the market as they could for basically those atelier games, that sort of stuff, where basically they're kind of just cranking these games out one a year, sometimes more often than that, and they're not too worried about the fit and finish so long as they have the basics slapped together. You still see you saw a lot of those games as well on the Wii U in the early days, games that were supposed to be on the Wii, and especially on the Wii, you saw a ton of GameCube games come over with just really hacked-in motion controls. And again, it's a thing to be concerned about. Legacy development can definitely hurt the way that a game looks. And what was the lead console? Was PS3 the lead console, and now they're working on getting it into good shape on the PS4? Always stuff to be concerned about. But obviously, it's all about the end product, and Attack on Titan looks pretty good, I'd say, so far. It definitely looks like a compelling little experience. It looks like at least they've sort of captured the action of the fights pretty well with the 3D maneuver gear. So, we'll have to wait and see in 2016. Just a quick one, right before I go into my review. Command & Conquer Red Alert 2 and Yuri's Revenge are both free on Origin. They've always got their little freebies thing on Origin. If you have Origin installed, I'd say it's worth grabbing it for yourself. If not, you got to really have to make the call as to whether you feel like installing Origin is worth the price of admission for that one. They had Command & Conquer 4 for free on there not too long ago. But hey, man, those are free games that they're free just forever. So, Origin's come a long way as far as a system that ruins as far as a platform that ruins your computer. It used to really have a lot of like RAM and CPU use problems. Most of those are gone now. And honestly, the customer service is better than Steam's. I will never use it as my sort of main game library, but they're not that bad. So, might be worth it if you're a fan of the Command & Conquer series, especially the Red Alert sub-series of the Command & Conquer series. You're adults, whatever, do what you want. So, here we go, kids. The moment no one's been waiting for, and literally no one asked about, my Metal Gear Solid 5 review. This review will contain every spoiler. Turn it off if you don't want to hear it. I put it at the end to make it nice and easy for you. Stop listening. If you don't want spoilers, I will be talking about every facet of Metal Gear Solid 5, story, everything. In depth. Well, as in depth as I can get with minor notes. So, for my one listener, there we go. I'll amend it. For my one listener out there, time to turn it up and get Metal Gear Solid 5 review going. Here we go. Let's jump into it. We're going to start. I've broken this down. I've given myself some notes, but I'm basically doing this off the cuff. I haven't written a long review. I've just given myself some notes to help remember, sort of where I'm going and what I'm doing and what's going on. We're going to start off with the graphics. I remember when Ground Zeroes came out, I thought, man, this looks really great. And honestly, it did at the time, because Ground Zeroes was a game that got in fairly early on and had some really nice water shaders and some things like that. But all in all, now that I've played through the entire game, I gotta say the graphics come off to me as basically just okay. The Fox engine it's a nice little engine. The load times are fairly snappy, and I gotta say, whoever handled optimization did an insane job. By top end standards, does it look as good as, say, The Witcher 3, or does it look as good as something like Until Dawn? No, it doesn't, and that's okay. It's an open world game. Obviously, it's nearly impossible, I think, to compete with Until Dawn. There are games that really focus on visual fidelity. I don't think that Metal Gear Solid 5 necessarily stacks up to them, and for atmosphere as well. It's a great game, but in general, the overall atmosphere of any open world is going to be sort of less of a focus. But I think it looks good. But again, for a modern AAA game, it looks just okay. Again, though, the back end on that thing, absolutely fucking insane. Konami let an absolute engine creating god go if that guy was responsible for the optimization. Even older hardware will have time not pushing 60 frames per second on this engine with a lot of stuff turned on. You can't say the same for The Witcher 3. The Witcher 3 has seen a couple of patches, I think, that tried to optimize just a little bit, especially with the changes that came in towards the end with Hairworks being added in, which was a big source of drama earlier this year. But, I can't complain too much. It's a pretty enough game. You never really feel like anything's out of place, but you do sort of see those little bits and bobs around the corners here and there where things just don't look as good as they do. They don't look quite as round. This or that thing isn't quite so tessellated. You end up a little too close to certain textures, and they're not quite being filtered well, or they didn't quite put enough juice into them, so there's just not enough space. And we're talking about, in this case, a 25 gigabyte game that essentially has two very, very large maps. I hesitate to call them open world maps. They are technically, in so much as they do not take place inside of a confined space or anything like that. But it's a well-optimized game. It looks just okay. I probably harped on enough about the graphics. I think one thing worth mentioning is the boob physics are nice, subtle, understated. It's one of those things that's become kind of vilified in recent times, and I won't have it. Damn it! I think by and large the engine is incredibly strong, and the fact that Konami's not going to use it for anything else is essentially a crime against humanity. There are some problems as far as the way the engine loads things through that I think could have been optimized out, but we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to gameplay. The second little sort of subtopic here, as I roll forward in my review, graphics was never going to be what I spend a long time harping on or flipping out about, but the second is going to be what I'm going to call Facebook elements to the game. These are essentially largely worthless bullshit that have to do with your mother base construction, limitations to what you can build, when, and how much time they take. I'm going to make a couple of very specific complaints first off. One, I knew straight from the jump that I was going to have to pick and choose which guns I wanted. I knew that I was never going to be able to get all the guns, and as time went on, I found out that these guns did not even instantly research all the time. Sometimes they take 18 plus minutes as you dig deeper down a tree, and that's 18 minutes of game time. We're not talking about, 18 minutes, I can start development on this mother base project, and I can send these guys on an outside mission, and I can start up a couple of weapons that are going to take a half hour each. I can send my guys on my little off-base missions, and then I can go to work. I can go whatever. I can do my day. I can just close the game off, and there you go. But you can't, because it's game time. So when something says it takes an hour and a half, it literally means the game has to be open, not paused, and running for an hour and a half before that completes. There's no way around these outside of hacking. You can't upgrade your research and development team to all S plus people. You could only really do that towards the end of the game anyway. And at that point, what's the point? I don't know. I mean, possibly with the forthcoming Metal Gear Online, some of this stuff will make sense. But you end up in the situation where none of this is really worth anything. And to add to that, later on in the game, they have an entire subsection of the game called your forward operating bases, where you build a second mother base for what essentially becomes double no fucking reason, and you just start dumping your GMP into that, because heaven forbid you have too much. That would be no good, and now you've got to put together a security team that really throws a giant wrench in your entire team layout from before, because your security team is mostly going to be all E-rank people from before that you don't even remember you've had because you've been upgrading your mother base, and now you've got to turn them into this group of people who are going to defend a forward operating base you maybe don't even want from people you definitely don't give a shit about, and you don't know who they are, and you don't really know why they're attacking you, so you can kind of win and lose points in this forward operating base system that is, again, is just a sink for your time and money. In the base team, again, if you have no interest in the online components here, this whole FOB nuke war, the grand sum total of which is you get an extra 4 lines of dialogue at the ending if you take out some specific number of nukes, which generally seemed impossible to do unless I wanted to spend weeks and weeks waiting to finish the game while FOB missions ran. There's no point to any of it. Same for the base development in general, other than the fact that as a player playing the game, you're going to want the biggest, coolest base with all the shit on it. There's not really a whole lot of purpose to it. I mean, it's frustrating. The Facebook elements are crap. They stand between you and gameplay, and they were a terrible idea. You can purchase mother base points to rush development of things. I do not consider that a viable thing. I don't consider it real. It does not exist as far as I'm concerned, because there is no way in fuck I am going to give you $5 for enough mother base points to rush the completion of my third medical platform, which does literally nothing for me in game other than allow me to add more medical staff, which I'm not really sure why I need, but whatever. That's fine. I guess I could get my forward operating base put into super ultra mode. That way, anytime somebody comes to try and kill my forward operating base that I don't care about, they can, I guess, run into my guys that I paid to be there. I paid literal real world money on top of the price of the game to be there. That's a frustrating thing that I'd say runs deeper in general into sort of the problem sub the game than I'm willing to care about, because it's a Metal Gear Solid game. I'm not here for the online. I'm not here for any of that. I don't care. And that's really the biggest problem with trying to get anybody to attach to the system. I don't give a fuck if my forward operating base is 5th best in North America. Why do I have a leaderboard for a thing I can't even go to? It's imaginary. Like, it literally is a Facebook game, except instead of having you're going to your farm in Farmville, they're like, you totally have a farm. Click this button to make your farm better. It's totally real in there. Here, click this button and we'll tell you that your farm guys on your farm that you totally have are totally planting rutabagas right now. Isn't that great? You planted rutabagas. I mean, they planted rutabagas. We promise. You can't look at it, but they did. Don't worry about it. Ugh. Worthless. Absolutely worthless. All the Facebook shit. Mostly just a side annoyance time sink for people who want to do that. And I consider that 100% fine. Where it really bothers me is Intel teams and R&D team, or rather the R&D team, it taking 18 minutes for certain weapons, unless you, I guess, have enough people of S rank, again, which you can't get till the end of the game, which they don't matter at that point. Because at that point, what am I? I'm farming personnel. That doesn't make sense for me to just go out and farm personnel. So I have a better Intel team. So it doesn't take me 18 minutes to build a silencer for a gun I already have. Doesn't make sense. That's really the most atrocious part of the Facebook game element to me, because the rest of it I can ignore. I don't have to care. So I gotta say that one's, it's kind of a pain, but what are you gonna do? Facebook elements, fuck them. I think they were a detriment more than anything. I understand the whole GMP thing. I know they're carrying it over from Peace Walker. That's fine. But it added nothing to the game, and I think by and large it took from the game in a way that made me fairly annoyed. I didn't mind Mother Base. I like having a Mother Base. I liked building up Mother Base. I did not like micromanaging my staff. I probably am one of 900% of everybody that went in and just pressed V to get all staff open, and then I assigned all staff based on their strengths. That was literally the first thing I did and the only thing I did throughout the rest of the game. And then they gave me my security team, which made me go, oh shit, I'm going to have to go back and fucking and put these guys, oh god, I'm going to have to make my security team a little better. And then I realized that really only mattered for the what you call it. What do you call that thing? Really only mattered for the forward operating bases and wasn't really a big deal in general. So then I just kind of stopped giving a shit. My security team was trash, and I bought the upgrades to make them a little bit better gear, but I don't care. I don't care. Fuck the FOB system. It's stupid. That's enough about the Facebook elements, I think. I'm going to move on to gameplay now. And that's one of those places where we've seen, even starting with Metal Gear Solid 3, his attempt, or rather Metal Gear good talk me do. Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, he tried to move towards more of a, what do you want to call it? A third-person shooter style of system. You saw that carry through onto Metal Gear Solid 4, where it essentially ended up turning the game into a worthless stealth. Or rather, towards the end of the game, it was very worthless to stealth. You had enough ammo, you had enough guns developed. It just didn't matter. It wasn't necessary to care about anything. And honestly, you were still playing with a controller, so it's still a little bit awkward in that way that Metal Gear Solid's third-person aiming is, because it didn't do quite enough aim correction for a controller to really feel good running around. But now, on the PC, I gotta say, the gameplay is fantastic. It's tight. The stealth feels good, and it feels manageable. It's finally, they've gotten rid of the Soliton radar, and I'm just thinking to myself, that is great. That I don't care that it's gone, and that is probably the biggest hallmark of things work now. Because I have no idea where anyone is or where they're looking, and it doesn't matter because I have enough things to mark the enemy, and if I go around a corner and somebody's there, I can just turn and shoot them. So the gameplay is on par with modern titles from a strict gameplay perspective. It is a great sort of sandbox of I can go do whatever I want. For the most part, I'll say. There are two very large maps. Again, hesitate to call them full sandboxes, though they are very, very big. And I'll say, I applaud them for putting in the effort to doing two very distinct areas. You can really tell the difference between the Afghani desert and the Central African sort of jungle savanna scape. Those are really well done. They're beautiful. They feel distinct. The way that I approached everything in both of them was completely different. Tons of canyons and just hard corners to go around in the Afghani area, and then when you get down to Central Africa, things open up a lot more. And it was a lot of fun. So good on it. So great sandbox there. Problems, however, arise, and that's where people calling this a perfect game really kind of starts to stick in my craw. There is no meaningful fast travel. The fastest that you can get between two spots is 70 seconds, give or take. Super Bunny Hop did a video mentioning that as being the case, and that was if you pause the menu, go to return to ACC instead of calling in the helicopter. I'm not sure if that still charges you GMP. I don't feel like it should, But again, that's only available when you're not on a mission as well. So when you're doing overworld missions, return to ACC is the quickest way to do things there. And that's, again, only if you don't need to carry somebody back to the extraction zone or whatever. Obviously, you can always drive out of one in an open world mission as well. You can drive out of the hot zone and be done with it. But there is no fast travel. The problem with the fact that there is no fast travel is there are no direct routes between anything. The roads are giant desert tangles, and I'm sure the interest in that was keeping things realistic. There is a box fast travel system but it is convoluted and desperately annoying. You have to get an invoice from each base that has a fast travel system. That is only major bases, not outposts. You then put yourself in a box on an orange platform. You decide which other orange platform in the world you want to be taken to, and then you are dropped off summarily in the middle of a shit ton of enemies, almost none of which drop you off in a place where you could even start an attack without triggering a combat alert. Obviously, if you have your silencer in place, great. You can probably get it done there. But I got to say, the fast travel system, and generally the travel system at large, really reminded me of Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption was a game that was a beautiful story, fun gameplay, and, the best-looking horses that have ever been put into a game, regardless of anything. It's crazy how good those horses looked. It was dumb, especially considering, how old that game is. But Red Dead Redemption suffered from a very fatal flaw. It also suffered from a story flaw that I'll tie in when I start talking about the story here in a couple of minutes. But basically, in Red Dead Redemption, you could not fast travel from a town. To fast travel, you had to go out into the woods and set up a camp. You had to go out of the city, far enough away from a main road or the city. You couldn't fast travel on a main road. And pause the game, going through 3 or 4 different menus. All in all, it took 30 or 40 seconds to do all this if it was convenient, and then you could fast travel. Metal Gear Solid 5 is a lot like that. So if you played Red Dead Redemption and you were annoyed with the fast travel system in that, and you're not annoyed with the fast travel system in that, I don't know what kind of glasses you're wearing, but you can't see fucking anything straight because it's awful. It's terrible. Fast travel system is crap. And honestly, I think it's bad to the point of being unforgivable, how hard it is to get between missions. There needs to be a fast travel system in a world that large, especially with 2 maps. It is ridiculous to have to wait on a helicopter if you're in a situation where that's what you have to do. It should have been better. It's not better. It's bad. It's too much work. I doubt that since the entire team has probably been fired from Konami that any of that's ever going to get fixed. Actually, I think they're still working on Metal Gear Online, but whatever. I have no interest in Metal Gear Online whatsoever. I might play it just owing to the fact that I paid for the fucking game, so we'll see. My big final gripe about gameplay is the replayed levels. Once you get into Chapter 2, which there is a Chapter 2 to the game for some reason, a 2-chapter story seems weird to me. It should be 3 or more to call it chapters. I guess you could call it Act 2. There are plays in 2 acts, but that's a minor naming complaint, whatever, is they just start throwing unnecessarily difficult versions of replayed missions at you. And I think anyone gets annoyed when you see that you're playing the same mission again. That's just something that you're going to be annoyed with. In general, why would you bother? Like, I don't know, why am I going to play this mission twice? Doesn't make sense. But it's doubly annoying in that you're not just playing the same mission twice, you're playing the same mission with arbitrary added difficulty. In some cases, they've added more tanks that are going to try to shoot at you. In some cases, they're going to add, you have to do the thing in total stealth, which means if anybody spots you, mission over. There's the subsistence missions where you get nothing and you have to go in and kill someone and take their gun. Those end up being annoying, especially after you've been playing the game for 40 plus hours with the weapons that you have specifically built out, knowing that you're not going to be able to build all the weapons. You've built them out knowing that they're the ones that you like. So very, very annoyed about that. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. And I'm against it. So, on to the story. This is where the spoilers are going to happen. Obviously, there's some gameplay spoilers so far. That's why I threw the big spoiler warning in. But it is story and character time, and that's one of the things that I want to start talking about. Is we're going to start talking. We're going to mix things in just a little bit because I want to make a reference back to Red Dead. So this is sort of a gameplay thing. I do like from the jump that the story in place does not conflict with the actions that you're able to perform. In Red Dead Redemption, it was made incredibly plain time and time again from a story point of view. And obviously this is a Rockstar game. So that was a Rockstar game. This is a Kojima production. So it's completely different. But this is a trap that I feel that Metal Gear Solid 5 could have fallen into. It is the case that in Red Dead Redemption, driving into a town and killing everyone made no sense. You know, I'm John Marston, and I'm trying to get my life together. I'm trying to stop being a bad guy. So I can't ride into a town and kill everybody. Metal Gear Solid 5 does away with that by basically making everybody a member of a military faction everywhere you go, which doesn't make a lot of sense. There should be some people around in Central Africa and Afghanistan, but they basically hand-wave that away and they say, no, everybody here is a bad guy with a shooter-do, and he will shooter-do at you if he sees your face. So it gives you a perfectly good reason to roll into a town, shoot the living fuck out of everybody, and that's nice. And the story overall was, I guess, okay. But let's roll into Spoiler Town. Let's go to Spoiler Country now. Snake is flat and uninteresting in this game. And you'll notice I call him Snake and not Big Boss. If you know at all what Kiefer Sutherland sounds like, then the entirety of the game is spoiled from the very first moment. When your buddy Ishmael crab hops on to Quiet, back when she, still had working lungs, and does his little crab maneuver, and then says we gave her a light. And I went, that's Kiefer Sutherland. But Snake is Kiefer Sutherland. So, just to spoil the entire ending, basically, well, I'll get around to it. Anyway, you're not Big Boss. That's the operative thing here. So instead, Venom Punished Snake has been written as this flat, boring, no one-liner kind of guy. He has absolutely no personality, which is, maybe intentional because, the whole idea is you're not Big Boss. You're somebody else. You're you. You helped build this dream with Big Boss, and you're the important guy that got blown up on the ship when Paz got kidnapped and all that kind of shit. So, great. Again, if you haven't finished the game, that might not make sense. But basically what happens is at the end of the game, you replay the man who sold the world, the entirety of the man who sold the world, with literally two differences. The difference in the cutscene at the beginning, showing that you were given plastic surgery to look like Big Boss. And at the end, where they reveal that your whole purpose in life is to take the place of Big Boss, and that this is part of a whole thing, and that, it's a body double. What this does is it conveniently wraps up some problems with basically plot holes in Metal Gear on the MSX. But, you basically slow crawl your way to being the most boring version of Snake that's ever been put into a game, and so much the worse for it. I mean, I swear you'd think Kiefer Sutherland was getting paid by the fucking syllable or something, because he just never talks. And that's one of those things that, in sort of the moment of the game, it might not bother you that much. It bothered me. I was like, why isn't Snake saying anything? Why is everything he says just gruff and matter of fact? Where's the charisma? Where's the guy that was gonna fuck Eva in a cave behind the waterfall because it was super romantic, but then he started thinking about his mom? Where's that guy? I want that guy in this game. We don't have that guy in this game. We have gruff, we have the equivalent of fucking Arkham City Batman. He fucking doesn't make a joke about anything. I guess he did make a couple jokes. So let's say we'll have Arkham Origins Batman. You think he's going to win? No. Yeah, I mean, it's just one-word answers to everything. no charisma, no personality. And maybe it was on purpose, but if it was wrong. It sucked. It was bad. It was real bad. It made the game less fun because you've got Miller there slowly turning into a fucking psychopath who thinks everybody's a spy all the time. And that had a lot of drama. And every time you're just waiting for Snake to say something, you're like, yeah, tell Miller off. Tell Miller to calm the fuck down. Tell him you're in charge, for fuck's sake. Say, I'm in fucking charge. And we don't get any explanation. I mean, we get sort of a hand-waving thing about how Ocelot isn't a bad guy, but Ocelot has no charisma, and no fault of Troy Baker on that one. He read the lines they gave him, sure, and he did a decent job of him, but he's an emotionless fucking list of facts for you. Did you know that in the 1800s Afghanistan? Who gives a shit, Troy Baker? Tell me something I care about. Tell me the thrill of battle. Ugh, and then you get your hand cut off. Be that guy for 2 fucking seconds. But he's not. He never is. Ocelot is bland, boring, doesn't do anything the entire time except give you information. The closest they come to having fun with a character is when Kazuhira Miller and Code Talker have some tapes off to the side, and that is, don't get me wrong, where a lot of the fun is, off to the side. It's over here, buttoned up into a little cassette tape that you can listen to while you're doing big boy work in your big boy pants out there shooting guys in the head. You get him talking about hamburgers with Code Talker, and it's fucking great. The whole Kazuhira hamburger, Code Talker hamburger thing is fucking so worth listening to. The tapes with Zero, the secret recordings of Zero that you get from doing the secret pause stuff is great, but they're tapes. They're over here. Why am I not playing these cutscenes? Why am I just coming to Mother Base, washing off the blood, so I don't go crazy, which doesn't happen, is not a part of the game. You can leave the blood on you for months at a time. Nothing happens. And then I'm going back out to Afghanistan to shoot more guys in the head, to extract random asshole number 63 with my Fulton extraction system. And again, the gameplay is satisfying. But the story is tucked away into a corner and shamed for daring to be there. Most of it's bland and uninteresting. Africa Today, every single one of those tapes is boring. Afghanistan Today, all just dry bullshit. The best stuff, the tapes that are about other characters, are fairly interesting. But again, a lot of the fun of a Metal Gear Solid game is not there. There's no wacky, ridiculous bullshit. There's no character to anybody. Ocelot's been turned into a nobody. Miller is the closest you get to fun and exciting, and he does it over in the corner. Code Talker's pretty funny, honestly, but only in the tapes. Code Talker in the game is dead serious all the time. Quiet is the closest you get to any sort of emotion or whimsy, and she can't fucking talk. What does that say about anything? It's ridiculous, and that's more's the pity, honestly. A lot of great characters spoiled and made bland, all in the interest of making a fucking Hideo Kojima fan fiction spaghetti western action movie with Kiefer Sutherland. But that's not the end of it. I've got specific complaints. Let's talk about Skullface. Let's talk about the entirety of Chapter 1. So Skullface has created these parasites, and the parasites make everybody grow boobs outside of their body, glowing boobs, that he then harvests for his boob factory in North Korea or something like that. I don't really know. Basically, there's this whole idea of a parasite. It's the nanomachines thing again, but this time it's the parasites that gave us language in the before time, and he's training them to learn every language in the world so that he has a weapon to surpass Metal Gear, which would be most weapons, because there's only ever been like one Metal Gear and they always get blown up. So he's got Sahelanthropus, which he's going to sell to people, which again, let me just take a sub note. Worst name for anything ever. Hard to pronounce. Not very great. Terrible. I don't like it, and it's fine. It's whatever. But Skullface is doing his whole thing. He is an absolute caricature of a bad guy. You know, he's got Volgan's corpse walking around shooting fire at you on what I'm still not entirely sure was a hallucination horse. Don't really know. Considering the whole Paz incident, I'm not entirely convinced that Volgan ever had a half-dead fire horse unicorn thing. Maybe he did. I could certainly dress my horse up as it at some point, but I don't really know. But Skullface has got this whole big plan, and honestly, he's shaping up to be a pretty hilarious bad guy, which is one of those things that I love. Ridiculous bad guys are just an absolute baseline for Metal Gear Solid 5. I mean, Jesus, think about the Fear. What a weird, hilarious, gross thing that guy was, climbing backwards up a tree and going, "The Fear!" all the time. It's fucking great. Skullface wanted to be that guy. What lust for vengeance? Who? You know, that whole, oh my God, that's the best sequence in the whole game. I died like twice on purpose just to watch that fucking ridiculous scene again, because him screaming, What lust for revenge? Oh, that was great. And then he does, on the way to that whole thing, he has a giant monologue, and he's got this little monologue that's like, telling you the whole plan and great, super duper. And owing to the fact that they made the map so big, they have to play an entire song in the middle of his monologue. They stop him talking. Nothing happens except that this car goes 30 miles an hour for another 4.5 minutes. They play an entire 3-4 minute song. Then he starts talking again. The whole time, Snake says nothing. Doesn't even talk to the bad guy. Doesn't say, let's work this out in Metal Gear. He doesn't do any of that. It's ridiculous. Just sitting on a Jeep, dead quiet for 3 or 4 minutes while there's a song playing that they can't hear. And then you get to the action again because they didn't pace it right and Kojima couldn't write enough words to fill in the middle. I'd forgive it if it weren't for the fact that 3 seconds later, you don't even beat Skullface. A child, which I'll get to my annoyance about, mind controls the robot with the help of Psycho Mantis and steps on him. And you don't even fight it. You don't even fight Skullface. He doesn't have any tricks. He's not like full of crazy stamina. He doesn't have a life bar or anything. He just gets stepped on and hit with an iron girder. So then your entire first chapter villain, you don't even fight. I mean, there's Sahelanthropus, and then you fight Sahelanthropus. Well, what are you going to do? But you don't even fight him. You don't even fight the guy. Ridiculous. And then Skullface is dead, and then there's some shit where they shoot his arms and legs off, and that's great. That's great. Revenge. I like the cold-blooded revenge. It made me feel justified in all the killing I was doing in the game, because I'm like, oh, okay, we're not playing this nicey nice. We can be mean in this game. We're not going to get negative points for shooting a guy in the face. And that's good, because again, you're playing a big boss, or so you think. So that's fine. But all in all, that's it for Skullface. I mean, the vocal cord parasite continues to be this nebulous problem that just kind of floats around, but by and large just goes away. Skullface is taken out unceremoniously after you've had a fight with Snagglepuss. You fight with Snagglepuss after that, and once you kill Snagglepuss, that's it, man. It's that's the end of all the drama. There's no point to any of it. Skullface is gone. The guy who was literally your entire reason for doing any of this shit is gone, and that's the end of chapter 1. So Skullface ends up being this boss. At the end of chapter 1, you kill the guy who seems to be the main villain, and in Ground Zeroes was the main villain, and the whole XOF team and all that stuff. They blew up your platform, and then you killed him. So in one of the worst narrative decisions ever, you kill off Skullface inconsequentially. He doesn't end up mattering at all, other than like I guess the whole idea here is the phantoms that haunt us, right? So his destructive things that have created are still around in the world because Psychic Boy picks up the vial of English angry disease thing out of the pile and runs off with it, and so then you have to deal with that maybe later, but you don't ever deal with it. That plot thread stays open. You crush Sahelanthropus, you take it back to the base. Psychic Boy helps Eli steal Sahelanthropus, and then that whole plot thread never resolves. So literally everything that Skullface is gone. Presumably there was a tie-up to that, but that content, I guess, got cut, and so we have the massive lack of resolution of a gigantic nuclear crazy thing and parasites. They're just out there in the world somewhere, and hey, guess what? Kojima's been fired, and Konami doesn't make games anymore, so that's it. That's it for that. That's all done. So that was a big bunch of bullshit. Your main villain turns out to be just dead at the end of chapter 1 for no purpose. And the entire thing kind of, I guess, starts to turn towards, like I said, phantoms, right? So that becomes the theme there. But I was very disappointed that Skullface had no consequence. There was nothing to him. I mean, it was really, he created a couple terrible things that then went on to be a problem, but in general, he's just uninteresting. Skullface did nothing. He contributed 10 lines to the entire story aside from his giant monologue, and then he's dead. So our big villain, our big bad that we're chasing after, and his entirely ridiculous takes too long to kill friends, we got to deal with them a couple of times, but there's just nothing. There's nothing to him. So whatever. We'll talk a little bit about Emmerich now. Emmerich was a desperately annoying character from a story point of view because, honestly, the entire time you're basically just screaming at the screen, like, just kick him out. Like, there's a million things that point to Emmerich might be a bad guy. He might be a traitor, but they don't do anything about it. They know the entire time up until basically it's incontrovertible that he taught these little, African soldier babies how to do stuff, how to fix this, and how to try to kill Big Boss, and he was getting them weapons and whatever. Like, basically you pin him to the wall on that shit, and then finally they put him on a boat and set him out to sea. Like, we're doing him a fucking favor. Oh, we're not enemies anymore. We're enemies now, so if we see him again, we'll kill him. And burr, 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 burr. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Emmerich deserved a bullet in the head. He deserved a bullet in the head early and often. Multiple bullets, by my count. It's ridiculous. Again, it was still a little bit up in the air, and I guess whatever, you're leaving that vague, but the baseline point of the problem is basically after problem 1 with Huey Emmerich, he was not worth it. He was not worth the potential trouble. He was not worth allowing to Cypher to get their hands on based on the very story they were telling. A bullet in his brain was a great way to solve all of the potential problems that were Huey Emmerich. So his entire existence in the entire thing is questionable at best. He gives you a walker and he gives you battle gear. Battle gear, I'm going to tell you, kids, unless you're really dilly-dallying in the game, you will not get before you finish the game. If at any point you say, you know what, I think I'm sick of replaying the same mission 6 times, and I think I finished all of my side ops, so I think what I'm going to do is just play this next story mission, well, guess what? The game is probably ending now, and you're not going to get to drive around in battle gear. So, good luck getting battle gear before the end of the game. I don't think it's possible because you have to do so many missions, and the missions for your away team get to the point of being S-rank missions before you ever get battle gear. You get it after, I think, 1 S-rank mission, but you have to do an ED, C, B, A, and then S-rank missions. So 6 missions that get increasingly long, and again, that's game time. Those don't tick down while you're not playing. Never get battle gear. Huey's pointless. He's a snivelly little shit, and he keeps running up to you like you're supposed to have a conscience. Like he's not. I'm going out and I'm shooting people in the face every single day, and every time you come back, Huey's like, how could you do that? I mean, what about your feelings? Those people trusted you, Bergbass. And fuck him. He was an annoyance the entire time. Sadly, if you don't go pick him up, you don't get more story. They call it a side op, but there are like 18 different important side ops. Really, there's 4 side ops. 4 plus 6, I guess, that are important that if you don't do, the story won't progress. So, not side ops, just regular missions. Don't know why they put it in the side ops list. Found it kind of annoying, personally, just from a story progression point of view. But that's very, very annoying to me. Huey was annoying. I could bitch about Huey all day long. But instead, what I'm going to bitch about is children. Oh boy, the children. If you watch my highlight videos, you'll notice that I threw a grenade into a pile of children at one point in the game, and the mission quickly told me that I was a real asshole. If you listen to the tapes or even the codec or radio communications with your base, you'll find out that these children are, quote, as dangerous as any man when they're holding a gun. So, you have that entire setup, but you're not allowed to kill the children. In fact, you are going to be forced to rescue a group of these children rather than shoot them as the client requested in the mission where you're sent to pick up the little tykes. And then you're going to be sent to a place to grab the white mamba, Eli, Liquid Snake. So, I don't think I've ever been more annoyed by a forced character in the first place. I will throw the caveat out there. I hate children. I hate them. So I was annoyed at this. I was annoyed when we brought the little African soldier kids back because that annoyed me. So then we go and we get into a really pointless CQC fight. That's what they wanted me to do with Liquid Snake, future Liquid Snake Eli. But I wasn't really having that, and so I shot him in the face several times with the tranquilizer darts, and I gave Quiet the tranquilizer darts and had her pop a couple in them. Because when you have the cover me option and the tranquilizer rifle, that mission's not really that big of a problem. So, very annoying fight with him. And then they keep having him try to kill you, but at no point do you do anything about it. And that's the thing that bothers me. I'm not allowed in this game to make a decision about anything. So I'm forced to sit here with Eli on the base, fomenting hate for Big Boss among his little child soldier buddies. And at no point can I take any action to try to stop that other than to come back and have another battle with him, boss. Thanks, Troy Baker. I'll go do that. I'll go have another little punch fight with the little moron. Oh, no, wait. I'll sneak up on him, and I'll shoot him in the fucking head with a tranquilizer dart, and we'll just save ourselves 20 minutes. I'm not going to punch that kid for forever while he scurries around the deck. Where did he get stun grenades? He just has like an entire fucking box of stun grenades. So you've got this annoying little shithead that is actively undermining the chain of command on this boat, and you've got Miller the entire time going, oh, he's just a little scamp, oh, he's just a scamp. And since you're playing mute Big Boss, at no point does he say anything like, it's compromising the mission, Metal Gear. No point do we get a nice David Hayter line there that's ridiculous. We get nothing. And so Eli stays on the ship until he basically promises that they're going to start an active rebellion against you and try to kill you. At which point they steal Metal Gear with the help of the kid, of the psychic kid, which helps them frame Huey for fixing things. But they fix the Sahelanthropus. I'm sorry, not Metal Gear. Sorry, technically not. They help him fix the thing. They give him a bunch of guns. And they're feeding him information, and then they just leave. And then him and his ugly little kids, after trying to fucking fight with you for the entire game, at no point do you do anything like just stab him in the face and tell him, "Look, I'll cut it off. I'll cut everything off. All your little kid bits. I'll cut your fingers off, and we'll put you on a post, and just use you as an example to anybody else who wants to start some shit. At no point do they do that. Literally no point. And that's the frustrating. You've got Huey Emmerich causing the frustrating thing. You've got Huey Emmerich causing these problems. You've got Eli causing story problems. At no point does anyone try to do anything except go, oh, but these kids are so cute. The children are our future. It's such a fucking just bullshit. This is a base full of weapons, okay, and very dangerous shit. We're not going to let the kid run around because he's hard to control. This is not a bistro, and I'm not letting my kid express their creative freedom. He is a prisoner on our ship, and I'd shoot him. Why don't I have that option? You can't shoot kids. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I felt that Eli was ridiculous as much as I like Liquid, and as much I found the child written to be petulant and annoying, which I think, you could call that successful, that he was written as petulant and annoying, but the problem was that nobody took any sort of action on it, even though Ocelot wanted to several times. For some reason, he didn't. So I just found the entire thing vaguely annoying. There would be largely because it felt like the kid was basically allowed to do whatever he wanted, and he was hiding behind plot armor the entire time. At no point did Snake just literally backhand. I mean, he broke his arm one time, but that he still stayed petulant. Next time, break his arm and leave it fucking broken. You know what I mean? Don't just dislocate his elbow and then put it back in there. Fuck the kid up and then leave him fucked up and see how he likes that. I found all of that frustrating just in general because, one, nothing ever came of it. At no point do you ever fight Eli and get any revenge, and obviously you can't because he becomes Liquid later. But, nothing happened, and nothing that Liquid said that Big Boss said to him was ever said to him. In fact, I don't think Big Boss ever uttered a single word to him. Or Big Boss Snake punished Snake and never uttered a word to him. So very, very frustrating. I found Eli to be more bothersome than anything. I found the go and retrieve all the runaway children thing to be a deeply frustrating series of missions that had no point, no reward. I mean, they gave you, I think, 80,000 GMP, which is great, but there was no sort of story reward for it. It was like, I'm literally retrieving these kids that I don't want at my base so that they can come back and cause more trouble at my base. In fact, one of the little children is responsible for severe burns to Quiet's body, which kind of pissed me off. Ugh, ridiculous. Not to mention the escort missions that are required to even get the children there in the first place. And if you don't have the, Fulton extraction system thing, you end up doing that again. It's really annoying. Well, let's talk about Quiet, huh? The firebrand that is a character who dared to wear a bikini in a game full of just ridiculous stuff. I don't know why nobody had a problem with the 12-year-old boy with Ripley ab muscles showing all over the place, but whatever. We'll focus on Quiet for a minute. Quiet, I think, was sort of the highlight of the game for me. Her story is sort of the most coherent and interesting for the most part. I think she was definitely an entertaining character. The baseline was pretty interesting. She can't talk, so the humming was nice on missions. But by and large, she has an interesting story, and it was one that anytime there was an opportunity to further her story, that was something that I immediately did. I wanted to go hear about that. I listened to those tapes readily because I'm like, let's find out about it. She's a chick who can't talk, and she drinks and eats through her skin. That's very interesting. Let's see what's going on here. And then everybody just goes, that's a cop-out. That's a ridiculous cop-out. And I'm like, well, not really. Also, what's wrong with it? She looks good. Why wouldn't she have her body? What's shameful about that? What are we puritanical? Couldn't have a woman showing skin. My God, we have to cover them up, otherwise they'll become sex objects. I don't think anybody who played the game and who's played any of Quiet's story would look at her that way. Honestly, she was probably the most compelling part of the game, right up to a point. She makes... Again, she also took action. That's one of the things that I very much liked. Quiet did what was needed. And other people, obviously she couldn't tell people about that. Nobody ever gave her the benefit of the doubt, and I always found that vaguely annoying. I also find it deeply annoying that after they found out that she could speak Dene to Code Talker without killing everybody, nobody tried to use that as a vector to find stuff out about her. She's a compassionate character, interesting, and I gotta say, I found her story resolution to be literally the worst part of the entire thing. Let me try to think before I go to her story resolution if I can talk about anything else about Quiet. Hands down the best buddy in the entire game. That just straight up, 100%. She gets the job done, especially once you get her up above, I'd say, half buddy level. You get a cover me option where she'll just shoot people. And that's fantastic. I'm 100% on board with that. So, I think by and large for me, her story resolution is a real problem. And without going into the absolute specifics of her story resolution, essentially, she leaves for no real reason, and you have to go track her down, and some guys are going to gang rape her, and then you play literally the hardest mission in the entire game. You have to blow up something like 12 tanks. It's ridiculous. It's a ton of work. And what are you going to do? After you do that, owing to a series of absolute coincidences, she leaves forever. Drives me insane because you can't use her as a buddy. Like, she's gone. Super hard mission, and everything's fine, and you barely escape. You just get out of there and you get bit by a fucking snake, and she has to speak English to leave. Here's the thing, though. You're already inoculated against the parasite, and I'm assuming that she's symbiotic with the parasites, according to the story, so there's really no problem with her going back as long as she doesn't continue to speak English, because that's how it spreads. It's not necessarily... I mean, maybe she's going to go die in the desert. I don't really know. They're super unclear about it. And she finally talks, but it's such a convoluted way to get there that all I can walk away with is that I'm deeply frustrated with her plot resolution. It's like every other thread in the entire game. Nothing resolves. Her plot doesn't resolve. Eli's plot doesn't resolve. We put Emmerich on a fucking boat and send him to nowhere. And hey, that brings me to the last little part. The game doesn't resolve. The final bit of the story, it just ends up, that truth mission ends up telling you a stupid backwards plot, which again, I already covered that a little bit earlier on, and it just doesn't end up mattering. Nothing. You basically find out that, hey, good work, everybody, I guess, for nothing. And also, here comes Metal Gear 1. Operation Intrude in 313. So there's like a smirk and a weird voiceover on a tape from Kiefer Sutherland that's bland and dry, and then a knowing smirk, and then just a bunch of wasted time. And not to mention that this is after they force you to, I guess, in the name of proper narrative, replay the entire first mission of the game. The entire first mission of the game. All that needed to be was a flashback cutscene that was 3 minutes long. So, it's frustrating. Just to run the entire thing down, let's run it down. The entire game is a tangled mess. A crazy strong start that makes you think, this is going to be good. We're going somewhere. This is going to be fun and interesting. As long as you don't know what Kiefer Sutherland sounds like, this is going to be fun and interesting. There's a lot of unanswered questions when we get to Afghanistan, and everything is sort of like, okay, this open world's good, the gameplay's fun. And then you get, I'd say, a couple hours into the game, and you start to go, where are the cutscenes? Where are the 45-minute cutscenes? 9.5 hours of cutscenes. Just cutscenes in Metal Gear Solid 4. Look it up. There's a YouTube video All the cutscenes from Metal Gear Solid 4. All that. It's 9.5 hours of just the cutscenes. No gameplay, just cutscenes. There's a cutscene every 2 minutes. It's ridiculous. So switch to this. Almost no cutscenes, ever. And most of them are under a minute, or under 2 at the very least. So basically, Kojima took his entire thing, finally I guess got sick of the criticism of it, and made an open world game. Took all the cutscenes out of it, moved all of the storytelling into tapes that I would have been more than happy to watch over the course of the game, and honestly would have made me happier about the time spent getting into and out of the helicopter if I'd seen those as cutscenes rather than as tapes. But it just ended up being underwhelming. The story didn't resolve. The game is fun. If you want to play a fun game, get it. It's super fun. But if, like me, you've been playing the Metal Gear Solid games since they came out, Metal Gear Solid was one of my favorite games of all time. Metal Gear Solid 3 is definitely up there, story-wise. This the whole thing with the boss. I love it, the ridiculousness of the characters. Eva is a complex character, with depth in that game. Ocelot is as well. There's a lot going on behind the scenes in Metal Gear Solid 3. I hate the gameplay in Snake Eater, but from a story point of view, it's one of my favorite games. This, from a gameplay point of view, is good. It's a good game to play. It's satisfying. There's a lot of emergent gameplay possibilities, but the story is nothing. It's serious garbage with a joke or weird thing mixed in here and there. The chicken hat is this attempt at recreating the whimsy of a game that this isn't, and it just is depressing. And Snake is flat and lulls his way through the entire thing. Kiefer Sutherland reads an entirety of 20 lines across the entire thing. Nobody ever questions anything. I will say, for the story, the one thing that really, really got me was 42. Chapter 42. Sadly, there's a bug in Chapter 42. It's still there, or was still there in my game, even though the update said that they'd fixed it. I managed to get that mission playable, but then when I played it, half of my crew's face were missing. So they were just eyeballs and teeth floating around. It kind of lessened the impact of it, but it was a beautiful mission, I thought, and really well thought out. The biggest downside to that mission was Huey's incessant wailing, and I wish he had been dead at the time because that would have made the mission even better, but what are you going to do? It serves to make you hate him even more, I think, so if you want to look at it from that point of view, it's effective. But by and large, I think the game, on a story level, ends up being a series of cop-outs and unfinished things and unanswered questions. Skullface has no consequence. Emmerich, is he a spy? Isn't he? We're not going to get any resolution on that because for some reason we've decided to be nice enough to let him leave, I guess as a thank you for his service creating weapons. Now we're going to let him go out in a boat, maybe assume that he died. Probably he'll get picked up by somebody. Miller even calls out as much. He says, nobody that we ever leave to die dies. Man, can't you figure this shit out? Eli is a giant unraveled thread that just doesn't make sense, and honestly, I felt was entirely unnecessary to the game. In fact, the entire children's subplot was unnecessary to the game, and I thought that the fact that you couldn't actually do anything with them felt a little bit half-hearted. You couldn't shoot the children, you couldn't send them out on missions, they just sit in your base, and so there's no reward for bringing them in. It's a requirement of the story. It's telling me how humane I'm supposed to be. Oh, we're fine to kill any number of men who've done us no personal harm, might if we go into a restricted base that they have every right to be protecting and are paid to do so. But if we shoot one of these children who would gladly take up arms against us, and do, in the Eli mission, we're the devil. But that's the thing. In this game, I was fine with being the devil. I had a very large horn, in fact, and seemed to be always covered in blood, and I found it just troubling that I wasn't allowed to make that decision for myself. It wasn't really an open world, and we weren't really breaching taboos, and I do think that Kojima, talking about taboos in the interviews that he's done, he was talking about the children's soldiers. But you're not allowed to kill them. I don't know if that's because someone backed off of a decision, or if that was the decision from the jump. one way or another. I find the inclusion of Eli in Chapter 2 wholly unnecessary. I found the entire Paz subplot to be one that was interesting, and I'd almost like to have seen have more of a ripple effect across the game, but it didn't. It just petered out and was of no consequence, and no one seemed bothered by it. So I was troubled. Again, an otherwise good game kind of ruined by a series of lack of endings, including the culmination of the game itself. It's the lack of an ending. We haven't resolved anything. We haven't defeated anyone. And honestly, I don't really feel great about moving forward. It's worth keeping in mind that I was supposed to be the bad guy, and at no point was I ever made to feel like I was the bad guy. Instead, I was pushed into a series of forced false moralities where I am the good guy. The worst I could do is shoot a couple people every now and again, and so I did. But at no point, even though my horn continued to grow larger as I murdered more people, blew up more stuff, and took over more bases, at no point was I the demon that must be stopped by Solid Snake and Metal Gear. At no point did I breach any taboos as promised by Kojima. And so I ended Metal Gear Solid 5, honestly, having played through the entire thing, feeling fairly satisfied. And then when the end came, I was kind of glad it was done. I had grown sick of the Facebook elements of the game. The entirety of the story had unraveled itself into just a ridiculous mess of boring characters, cliched statements, and cassette tapes that I could cycle through at will. And that was it. The game was over, and I was done, and I haven't launched it since, except to benchmark a couple things. And that's a sad fate for a game that really one would hope that you'd want to replay at a later date. I'm sure I'll replay Metal Gear Solid again. I'll replay Metal Gear Solid 2 at some point. It's not a bad game. I've played it twice. I've played Metal Gear 6 or 7 times. Every now and again I'll pick up Mass Effect and play that. I've played Metal Gear Solid 3, I think, 4 times now. But at the end of the day, I don't know that I'm ever going to open up Metal Gear Solid 5 again. Maybe Ground Zeroes, hilariously, because there's something about Ground Zeroes that's somehow more enticing. The entirety of that stage is, it's fairly well laid out. It's grim and it's gruesome, but that's fine. And then some interesting things happen, but it's a tight story with enough cutscenes to keep you interested in between walking around a large base trying to kill the ever-respawning troops that inhabit it. Well, what are you going to do? Metal Gear Solid 5, it was a series of missed opportunities, a gameplay high, a story, and sort of base management low, and you end up in the middle with just a game that leaves me not caring. I don't know, 5 out of 10, I guess, if you're forced to put a number on it. Not great. Not your best effort, Kojima, and definitely not a finished game, and a bunch of, especially in the case of Quiet, unsatisfying story fake resolutions. Well, I think that pretty much covers it. I think I've done to death talking about Metal Gear Solid 5. I could probably keep going for a very long time thinking up new things to complain about here and there, but the most annoying being a snake bite that is not even a game mechanic that can happen anywhere else that I'm aware of, ruining my entire day, and so to the outro we will go. Thank you for listening. It's been a long one this time, an hour and a half, largely due to the Metal Gear Solid 5 review. I'll be back next Tuesday with another podcast, and I'll be back, honestly, if you're watching live, right after this to play some Mass Effect 2. Check out the other videos on my channel. If you're into that sort of thing, like and subscribe if you're into that sort of thing. And thanks for listening.